All right, welcome everybody. My name is JerryLin. I'm a principal engineer at Cisco. This is session 3028, so it's the 3000 level. So what that means is it's not introductory stuff. Usually with 3000 level, we get a little bit more details into configurations and things like that. So just give you a little bit of warning, like you may get bored, like, hey, why are so many different screenshots from a product, configuration, integrations? Well, it is the 3000 level that gets a little bit deeper, okay, for a deployment operation perspective here. This session is called, secure your infrastructure before the bad guys do it for you, or it's about how, it's a little funny, right? Just name like, how do you should secure your infrastructure before you get breached, that type of thing. And so like anything else, WebEx application, I will answer all questions that you post after this session, and then I'll answer them whenever. As long as the session rooms are alive, I will answer a question even way beyond June 13th if you have any. So just feel free to post it in the room for the benefit of everyone, and I will absolutely respond to every single question there. A little bit about myself. I've been at Cisco for 28 years. Majority of my careers all have been focusing on security at Cisco. Okay, and I have the honor and privilege to speak at Cisco Live for many, many years now. So I do a lot of sessions on zero trust and security architecture. So that's kind of my forte here at Cisco. I wrote a book before, long time ago, even before ICE was released on NAC technology. So I was part of that, but I was also very involved in the whole ICE development and product release. If you've seen the security reference architecture, a link on cisco.com/go/SRA, so that's my work with my team. I mean, it's not one person at Cisco, there's a team, but I led the effort to publish that from our website there. And I've done a bunch of speaking engagements. I had a chance to speak at RSA before. And then outside of work, I exercise a lot just to maintain my sanity. I'm a runner. And as I said in my other session at Zero Trust, like, hey, I run because I'm a marathoner. I just enjoy the pain. I enjoy the pain. So if anybody wants to run this week while I'm still here, hit me up. I've been out running like 6 a.m., 6:30 every morning. It's part of my training, so I'm training for my next marathon. I did one 6 weeks ago, and then I have the next one coming up in September, so I am in training. So if you want to run in this 80-degree heat at 6 o'clock in the morning, pain management, I'm there for you, right? So I'm supporting you in terms of physical as well as mental here in terms of security. So for me, it's security, my passion, and running and doing marathons is my other passion. So cool stuff. And I've done Boston, by the way, so I've been lucky enough to qualify for Boston, run Boston Marathon 4 times. I'm sorry? So my qualifying time, first time I ran Boston was in 2012, so my qualifying time was 3 hours and 10 minutes. So I had to run sub 3 hours and 10 minutes, so I ran 3:09 at another marathon to qualify just to get into Boston, so it was painful. So, and now I'm a little bit older, okay, so I'm not my qualifying time now. I have to run at 3 hours and 20 minutes for me to really get into Boston. So anything above that is like, I can't get in. There's too many fast runners around the world. So it's painful, but I do it because I enjoy it. I enjoy the mental training type of thing. So you like pain, that's why you're yeah, okay. That's the best one I heard all day. Yeah, it's about pain management. So, but again, you heard about the runner's high, right? You've all heard about the runner's high. I mean, there's been times where I'm just running 10, 15 miles into my run, and I'm just clicking away at my mileage, and I feel like I'm in cloud 9, right? It's the runner's high. It just comes and goes randomly, and you just feel so good that you're moving, and it's so effortless. So that's the feeling I get time to time. It doesn't happen all the time. It has never happened in a marathon. It's like, I pray for that. It never happens. But still, it comes in training. It's such a great feeling. It's the endorphin release. Okay, so if you want to talk about marathoning outside of security, we're going to talk about here. I'm here at the end of it. And I love to talk about running shoes, right? The innovation that's in running shoes with the carbon fiber plates, fabulous. So let's talk about that afterwards if you want, okay? But have you never anybody try the carbon fiber plate shoes? I see one hand, only one. Yeah, the carbon fiber plated shoes. So all of those shoes, like you may have gone out and bought some regular running shoes that's kind of soft. If you ever buy those high-end carbon fiber shoes, they're about $250 and above. Okay, it's a high cost shoe. You feel like you're on trampolines. I mean, you will stand there and go, wow, I'm on trampolines. I mean, these are, okay, not, all the manufacturer has a Nike, the Vaporflies, the Alphaflies, Saucony, Hoka's. Every manufacturer now has carbon fiber shoes. And like world records are being broken, right? Like the London Marathon, right? Sub 2 hours. That one's done in the Puma shoes. So every manufacturer has their own little secret in terms of how to position the carbon fiber plate to make it more bouncy and more efficient. It's absolutely amazing what technology can do here. Anyway, but I don't want to burn up time for the security session here. I should do a session about running shoes. So then maybe they'll pay me here. So what we're going to talk about today is infrastructure security. We're going to talk about some recent events. We'll talk about the networking protocols involved in securing your infrastructure and how to enable a bunch of these things to make sure you're more prepared for your secure down your infrastructure. And then we'll end with Live Protect. Anybody seen Live Protect in action? Anybody using Live Protect in their network? It's a trick question. It's not released officially GA yet, so thank you. So it's an early preview, but it's supposed to go GA in July, according to G2 at the keynote yesterday. Like he said, Live Protect is going to go live. Anyway, we'll talk more about that as we get there, okay? So the first question is, what infrastructure security? Who cares? What's there? Well, first problem is you may have heard of Salt Typhoon. I talked about it in my previous session, and you may have seen it in the, on the internet, newspaper articles, et cetera. First problem is Salt Typhoon, right? It's known as the spy. And Salt Typhoon basically is a Chinese APT. It's been around for years, but in the last year and a half, they targeted all the large ISPs around the world, and definitely all the major ones in the US were impacted. Every single one of them. There's no ISP that didn't say, no, it didn't happen. Every one of them was impacted by Salt Typhoon. And really is bad guys compromised the infrastructure, and then they got into the network, they stay underneath the radar, and they're going to town. They're leveraging PowerShell, leveraging tools of the LAN, leveraging routers and switches, whatever capability they can get as a network operator, and they're just collecting information, not causing any problem with network operations. They're just there hiding in the network. Like if there's somebody in your house in your closet, they're hiding there. You just don't know, okay? And so that's the spy, if you will, there. And the second one is Salt Typhoon. Salt Typhoon is sort of similar, and it happened just a little bit after. Salt Typhoon is known as the saboteur, right? It's bad guys compromising end-of-life old gear. End-of-life old gear, focusing on critical infrastructure, and they compromise old gears, routers, et cetera, SOHO routers, and they modify the OS, still running, modify the OS, implant their little rootkits, what have you, and now they're there, waiting for something to happen. Waiting for something to happen when they need to do something. If they want to shut down your critical infrastructure, they can. Okay, so that's how they got in. So that's known as a saboteur. So these are all out there. It's there, but what can we do to stop it? That's the goal. How do we prevent further typhoons from coming in the future here? That's the goal here. Don't have an earthquake. Well, I lived in Southern California for the majority of my life, and I'm used to earthquakes every few years, the rolling ones or rumbling, whatever it is. So everyone's waiting for the big one to hit. So when the big one hits, Salt Typhoon or Volt Typhoon is going to be the least of my worries, okay? So the biggest thing is the California or the West Coast is going to branch off into the Pacific, and that's a bigger problem than So hopefully my data center resilience will be able to support that when that happens, right? Okay, so from an infrastructure perspective, why do we care? How does it all work? Well, what we're doing today is we have our infrastructure down here, and we do network-based authentication protocols like RADIUS, RFC 2865, TACACS 8907, right? These are the protocols that we all use, whether it be Cisco or non-Cisco, doesn't matter. It's what commonly used today. And then on the other hand is lots of applications now, in terms of zero trust, is all controlling access to data, to applications. It's a slightly different protocol, right? It's HTTP-based, TLS, and really it's SAML that's used to talk to these applications that reside across multi-cloud. That is the reality we live in here. Two different worlds, they use two different technologies to secure what they're designed to do. It's that simple. And based on these events of the typhoons, right, customers now are asking, can we consolidate these two to make things more secure? Because with SAML and all the FIDO, WebAuthn, passkey, OTP, this seems to be the right direction to go to lock down authentication and things. So Salt Typhoon, in a quick summary, is, as it described to us, is like, hey, the bad guys are in our network, right? They got the keys to the kingdom because they can see everything, but it's hard to detect because they're just there. And they act like one of you or me as an admin person with service account credentials, and basically your infrastructure has been compromised, and they're just sitting there collecting information, waiting for something to happen. And if you want to find out more about Salt Typhoon, how to prevent it, I mean, please go read the Talos blog or Wikipedia. It's a year and a half after the fact now. Information is out there. The bottom line is patch. 3 specific vulnerabilities, CVEs, patch. Okay, so if you don't patch, you are vulnerable. That's the bottom line here. Okay, like anything else. So, but with Salt Typhoon, the bad guys are in the network. They're in your network because maybe you have a device that wasn't patched in time. They got in, they logged in as you, they're capturing information. Well, how are they capturing information? So they're leveraging living off the land, right? They're running PowerShell scripts, using whatever machines that they can reach, using tools there so they remain undetected. And of course, things like monitor capture command, right? I use these commands all the time when I troubleshoot with Cisco TAC or when I troubleshoot with customers. So they let somebody leverage these commands, monitor, capture, interface, gig 1, protocol, et cetera, 49161. They're just capturing network-based management traffic on the device, upload it, and then they go ahead and just do their magic to try to decrypt it, right? Offline, and they have time because they're in your network, right? So it's just living off the land here, and that's how they continue to propagate themselves across your environment here. Okay, well, what is happening on the network? How does it all work? Just a quick review of TACACS. Who's not using TACACS in their environment today for network management? Not. What are you using, sir, if you're not using TACACS? Or is it RADIUS? Or full stack Meraki? Okay, so it's not, but yeah, okay. It's the other side of the authentication network I just talked about. Okay. All right, so really, you have no choice, right? You have RADIUS, or you're using TACACS, or the other SAML stuff with HTTP management that I presented here, right? Those are your only options. But really, TACACS is simple. Everybody uses TACACS because there's the AAA authentication, there's the authorization and accounting, right? And the authorization gives you granular access control. That is the beauty of it, and Cisco pioneered it so many years ago. These are the ports and protocols and things like that. It works well. It just works well. How does it work? Really, it's simply if you're trying to SSH into your network, you talk to a RADIUS or TACACS server. In this case, it's ICE. If you're not using ICE, you can use another TACACS server, other vendors, that's fine. But it all works the same way. Talks to the infrastructure, talks to your TACACS server. We send a response back like, who are you? You authenticate, and then we send you an authorization profile on what you can do. Right? It's simple, Very simple stuff here. And the difference of review is TACACS and RADIUS. Why would you use one versus the other? TACACS gives you, it's TCP based, a little bit more encryption in terms of security of your management traffic, and it gives you the detailed command authorization. That's the attractiveness of it, right? Because you can get down granular of, can somebody change the configuration on a switch or not? Okay, versus RADIUS, yeah, you can do that with the RADIUS as well. I've only seen customers implement RADIUS if they're using pretty much a multi-vendor product, right? Because some, I don't know, maybe some switches don't support TACACS. So in that case, they simply stick with the RADIUS. It just works for pretty much all vendors out there today, knowing that, hey, okay, I don't really need granular level authorization command control. Okay, so if that's what they want, that's okay. And the model, how really TACACS works is, you have, from an ICE perspective, I'll use ICE as an example because I use it, is there's a policy set and that defines like what protocols you can use. There's a condition for the authentication of, okay, what devices are participating in the authentication, what are the attributes, date and time, and then you do create the specific conditional matches for the authorization policy, and then you assign privilege. It's that simple, right? It's a very, very straightforward logic here. So from a configuration perspective, from a TACACS, is you go into ICE, go into device admin, and you simply create these multiple policies of what is the policy for for the specific device, and then you put the name, description, condition match, and then this is your authorization access piece of it. That's the logic behind it here. And so in this case, mine is a Catalyst 9300, and then if you expand the policy set, you can get deeper into, okay, well, how do I want to manage this? I have an authentication policy, and you decide on what authentication IDP or database or data store you want to authenticate against. And a common one is Active Directory. It's been around forever, and you can use Active Directory, you can use now, use SAML, you can use so many different things because the network has evolved and has advanced here. And then there's additional things that's been added. The MFA, multi-factor authentication. Anybody added that today? 1 or 2 or 3 or 4? Why isn't everybody using it? Let me ask that question. Why not? Okay, so this gentleman's response is, a lot of people are still using older software that doesn't support it, right? So you're absolutely right. Yeah, you have to upgrade to a more recent version to support it, right? So that's one reason, but from a security perspective, like zero trust, right? I mean, by the definition of zero trust and compliance, like everything should have multi-factor authentication enabled. Why? Besides software upgrade, I hope that's not the only reason. Or maybe that is the only reason. Oh, okay. So we can all agree, we need to turn on MFA. I mean, because if you talk to our Talos team, they said, look, majority of the incidents that they respond to when we get a call, they get involved, involves multi-factor authentication not enabled.
One of the challenges we have is we manage a lot of different customer environments, and sometimes they kind of force us down the path of the shared login.
Yeah.
And if it's super difficult to manage and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so this gentleman says you're doing multi-tenant, multi-customers you support, and a lot of them you share credentials, which is a bad practice. It's great for the hackers, like, hey, if I got one credential, I'm into 5 other tenants, right? So yeah, these are situations you can't control in time. Was there a question in the back, sir? Or? Yep. Yep. Yep, yep. Okay. Okay, so the question from the gentleman in the back is, yeah, I'm talking about Duo because I'm Cisco, right? This is a Cisco conference, so I'm kind of obligated to talk about Duo. But regardless of how you do MFA, okay, you can do RADIUS, and I have customers using RADIUS talking to the Microsoft NPS server. I'm like, isn't NPS end of sale or end of life or something, or to still have they refresh it, whatever the RADIUS server that they have for RADIUS, and then you enable multi-factor authentication on top of that. It's fine, right? It works. All I ask is that for that RADIUS connection you have, what are you doing to secure that communication channel? Are you putting RADIUS in RADSEC? Are you encapsulating RADIUS in IPSec? Are you encapsulating that in TLS? That's the question, is because of Salt Typhoon and Salt Typhoon, that those channels have traditionally been relying on secrets. If that secret is compromised, all management is off, right? That's why you have to put it in an encryption channel, right? So RADIUS is fine, make sure you put that in an encrypted channel here, okay? So for us, like, okay, multi-factor authentication for Cisco implementation, I'll talk more about it, is we built that into it. And we have Duo. Okay, so I'm sorry, if you don't have Duo, then you can't do it. So hopefully I can convince you to either use our solution or continue with what you have, right? Make sure MFA is turned on. That's kind of my ask of you. So for us is, okay, there's a category for MFA, and I turn on Duo, then there's more logic behind it, like, hey, if I authenticate with Duo, if it fails authentication, what happens? These are just the natural logic of the ICE policy engine here. And once you get past that, now we're down to authorization policy, right? So MFA was just an additional second factor check. Very simple, very straightforward here. And so here now at the authorization is you configure one for admin, one for help desk or contractors or whatever number of roles, and you create these shell profiles that the users can get access to. And then these shell profiles now, you can even get more granular of deny a command, allow all commands based on privilege levels, et cetera, et cetera. Again, I assume you guys are already using this, so you know what I'm talking about, right? Okay, so privilege level 0 is almost nothing. Just show commands. 1 is what you want to use because it enables more commands, or 15 is, hey, you can get into config T, that type of things from a configuration perspective here. And then, yeah, and as you create these TACACS set commands, you create these, you know, the help desk roles, and it gets mapped to, there's a name, and then you sort of define what they can do. I mean, you don't have to list all the commands that you want to allow, but you can. That's why there's you can say, these are the specific commands that I need. Anything that's not listed here will get denied, right? So there's actually a little checkbox here. It's like, hey, if it's not listed down below, it could be either permit or deny. You make that decision on what you want to allow that role or that authorization policy to be. Okay, so it gets pretty granular there. Okay, so that's the base of it, but from a threat perspective, but the bad guys may already be hiding in the network. They're already in your network because you didn't patch last week, or they've been there for 3 months or 6 months. We simply didn't know about it. So what do? What can you do to eventually identify them and bump them out? Well, turning on multi-factor is absolutely one of them. Once you encrypt the management channel, turning on multi-factor authentication, you register your phone. Now the bad guy can say, hey, I got Jerry's credential as an admin. I need to get in, but nope, because MFA is not at their disposal. They're locked out. Okay, so that's why I highly recommend it. Turn on multi-factor authentication to make things more secure to detect that. And this is just a flow of how MFA all works, right? It's just authenticate, talks through the Duo cloud. Duo issues a notification to the phone, and then they can get access to certain commands, et cetera. So enabling this is quite simple, right? It can't be hard, right? Because I actually was working with our Duo team, Duo and ICE team, like, guys, it's got to be simple. And they said, okay, we'll make it simple. As we created a category for MFA with Duo, and there's really just 2 sets of credentials that I needed to do. It's like there's an admin API and authentication API. It's an API calls between the 2 systems. That's all it is. And then you got to cut and paste these keys. So from a configuration perspective is account on the ICE side, and then on the Duo side is I have to create these applications, because that's how Duo works, or most of these proxy solutions or protection is like you create the applications that you want to protect. In this case, it's The admin API for ICE, so it's just, if you're, anybody using Duo here? A few, 1, 2, okay, so a handful, so thank you guys. So this is exactly what you would do, of create these applications and then cut and paste, and there's a couple of checkboxes in terms of permissions, cut and paste these metadata or information to the ICE side, right? You build that secure connection between these two systems, enable it. So there's an admin API, there's an auth API, but this is all documented in a Duo configuration notes if you want to look at it, but I'm just highlighting it for here. Cut and paste, enable for all users, which I don't recommend, but testing you can, but you can also lock it down to per group, like admin group or help desk groups and things that you would expect. And then you just kind of cut and paste these details and that's it, done. Now you have a secure API, really nothing fancy, and then from the Duo portal, it's like, all right, as long as when I authenticate with TACACS, I get into my commands and issue whatever commands, it all starts to show up from a logging perspective. It's that simple, right? So that's why I highly recommend it. Do this, and you'll never have to call our Talos incident response team again, right? Because you're not breached here. So that's a simple step, but the bad guys are also, they're in the network, they're capturing, sniffing, using the monitor capture command of credentials across the network, right? And those credentials could be encrypted or could not be encrypted. Well, this is where TACACS comes in with TLS 1.3. This was just released in June of last year. It's brand new, because we didn't really support it back over a year ago or a year and a half ago. It's brand new. Anybody already doing TLS 1.3 for ICE TACACS today? Nobody? Nobody? Because it's new, I get that. So, well, that means all of you guys are vulnerable then. If there's an attack on your network and you're using TLS 1.2 by default, the bad guys in your network going, hey, I'll capture commands, and I got keys to the kingdom already. I mean, that's the reality. That's what happened in Salt Typhoon. So we highly, highly recommend go to 1.3, okay? And these are the configurations for ICE to talk to IOSXE, XR, Nexus. These are links that you can follow. But I'll show you some examples of how do we enable that communication here. Well, first of all, difference between 1.2 and 1.3. Well, 1.3 by natural software evolution, anything higher means more security. That's the summary, more security. So round trip's a little shorter for 1.3, cipher suite's smaller, mandatory for perfect for secrecy, encryption, and complexity. Gets a little easier, sort of, by the protocol itself from a security perspective. But from an operations that you guys have to manage, there's a little bit more extra work, and I'll show you here. Okay, so again, 1.3 is where you should be. That's what we recommend here. So really, when I say more work, that means 1.3 deals with certificates. And we all know certificates, right? And I think, who was it that went to, Paul, you went to Paul's demystifying PKIs or certificates. If you've been to a session, then you'll know, oh, these are all the things I need to do. So like any PKIs, you got to generate a CSR, right? Certificate signing request. So you got to go into ICE and generate a certificate, create that, and you have to assign it for TACACS. Create a certificate for TACACS authentication. I recommend this because it's unique to your environment. By default, out of the box, you don't have to. You can use the default signed certificate by ICE when you first install it. But that's the same for every ICE deployment. So I don't recommend you use our default one. Create your own for your environment, okay? So when you do, that means you have to go through here, create your own TACACS. Again, it's just checkboxes that you enable, type in some information and say a market for TACACS use. Okay, so that's one extra step you got to do. And then once you do that, you see that, hey, here's my ICE TACACS certificate marked, used by TACACS communication itself, and these are your CA information. Okay, so that validates, okay, I've done the certificate here. And then enable 1.3 is simple. Go into the settings, go into the TACACS, uncheck 1.2 and go to 1.3 because you're enabling to a higher protocol, okay? And then there's a few more configurations. Unchecked TACACS for 1.2, 1.3. The ports are different now because it used to be 49, but now for us, we picked 6049. Okay, you can use our default if you wanted to, or you can use your own. And use your own meaning that as long as your ICE is syncing up with your infrastructure in terms of ports, use port 7777. We're in Vegas, right? That's a lucky number. Use whatever number you want. It's up to you, right? But by default, it's 6049. These are steps you got to follow here. And there's more things about, okay, I'm doing TACACS for 1.3, and since it is certificate, you can get very granular of establishing that secure connection. You can even look at the certificates of, hey, do I have the IP address? Do I have the right SANS field value within your certificate? Right? Get deeper into your certificate, looking at subject alternative name, if it's got the right device ID, device name, whatever field you want to match. It's there, and then you can lock it down. Really, really granular, right? Very secure. So that's it on the ICE side. Really, what generates certificates, a few check boxes, done, right? It's not that complicated. What's a little bit more work involves now is the infrastructure, getting your switch infrastructure to upgrade to 1.3. And if you're on, I assume you guys are running fairly recent iOS code, right? You're not running on 8-year-old code, right? Hopefully not. So fairly recent code will always say, like, when you configure your TACACS or RADIUS, right, you have to configure the IP address, connection, or the key, or the secret. Pretty much lately, is like, if you set it up without doing TLS, it'll tell you by design that, hey, you're doing TACACS, but it could be potential for eavesdropping, meaning someone's going to sniff the packets and steal credentials and get access to your infrastructure. So the iOS software itself, or XE software itself, will tell you that, just to remind you. So that's kind of a safety reminder there. So how do I make it work? These are the configurations. You just type in, this is from my lab. Hey, I'm in Seattle lab, the domain, crypto key generate, type in some PKI stuff. You guys can cut and paste all of this. Type crypto enroll, and then you go through the certificate enrollment. So this is creating a CSR, certificate signing request, for your switch, right? So you can have it signed by your CA. Creating that CSR, and you get this blob of stuff, right? Begin certificate, and there goes down, and there's an end certificate. There's a blob for base 64 code that you can cut and paste. Copy that. And then also, you have to trust the signing CA. So you have to grab the base 64 coded CA certificate from your CA, cut and paste into your switch by this command, crypto PKI authenticate, and then you paste that whole blob, begin and end certificate, and then do you want to accept? Yes, and boom. Okay, that's fairly simple, pretty easy, just cut and paste. I'll call that a no-brainer thing here. And then last thing is, okay, now the CSR I generated, I had it signed by my CA, and then I paste all that into the switch, and then now my router or my switch certificate has been imported. So is that right when you went through Paul's session about demystifying PKI? It should be right because it's working. So, question, yeah.
What's your recommendation on the best practice of longevity for these certificates on the device?
So the question is, what's the recommendation for longevity for the validity period of these certificates, right? It needs to get shorter and shorter and shorter. It used to be, I think, like Microsoft, a lot of my customers, and including us, we use the Microsoft CA as an example. I think it was 2 years, but there's actually commands, utility tools that you can extend to 5 years. We're moving towards ACME. Anybody know what ACME is, right? Like Let's Encrypt as an example. Even Let's Encrypt now says, I think their standards going forward, like they no longer issue 1 year. So we're using ACME at Cisco. It was 1 year. Every year I have to renew my certificate for 1 year. It's going down to 6 months or 30 days. It's 6 months? Okay. It's getting shorter and shorter. So following best practices, if you're leveraging Let's Encrypt, set up the Let's Encrypt client, it automatically renews it every 6 months, right? So that is best practices. But for simplicity in my lab, like, I don't want to deal with this. Like, I always change it to 5 years before, but I'm following. Question is, yeah. Yeah. So the question is Acme support coming to iOS XE? I don't work for the iOS X team, so it's being adopted at Cisco in time. We have already adopted this in our firewall as an example. With the latest firewall 10.0, we now have Acme support. Okay, so. All right, so the question is, firewall seems to be the only product adopted. Absolutely right, because I'm using it right now, and the rest of the infrastructure is taking time to adopt. And my marketing sales message to you guys, right? Secure networking, Cisco marketing is like, we're baking security into the network fabric. So message will get propagated down over time, and in time, Acme should be available for all products here. Was there a question, sir, or no? You're agreeing with me. Thank you. 6 months, all right. So anyway, so certificate, yeah, management it's kind of a pain, but it's the reality that we live in here, right? Okay, and this is the command for TLS 1.3 for TACACS. These are your TACACS commands, TLS port 6049. These, again, cut and paste from my doc or look at the links on how you set it up and you'll get it working. And these are just simple, regular commands here. From a TACACS perspective, you'll have all these things already, right? AAA, authenticate, authorize in your network structure. In this case, it's ICE group. For the authentication, there's also the enable command. Make sure you have the enable for backup in case your AAA server goes down, or you should have a backup one so you don't get locked out and have to default to enable. And then same thing with the authorization. These are exec for you. Once you authenticate, get into your shell of the switch itself, you have these if authenticated, and you configure these different privilege levels. There's lots of configuration examples out there. You know, I don't have to reinvent the wheel here. Just follow best practices, and it just works. Okay. And same thing, the rest of it, accounting and start and stop, all that. I just highly recommend it so you'll be able to track every command that's being used here. Troubleshooting, if you're really get stuck, I got this from TAC, like here are some links, some default commands from the TAC website on how to troubleshoot, okay? But so far has been fairly easy. If you just follow some config guides, it should work majority of the time. I say majority because there's always something like, well, is my network device not sending TACACS or RADIUS information through the right interface to route to my AAA server? That's one of the common ones I run into myself, and my customer's like, it doesn't work. Well, why doesn't it work? Can we just go back to basic networking and making sure packets are going out the right interface? So it's all part of this here for you to debug and troubleshoot. But it works pretty consistent in here. Okay, so that's just getting TACACS working, and then AAA getting TLS 1.3 working. But we also need to make sure MFA is enabled on top of that, right? And how do we do MFA on ICE as an example? Here's a command. I think this. Oh, okay. Here's a demo here of I go into my ICE. I go into the external identity sources. I go into the identity sources page there. Okay. And then, so I'm authenticating against Active Directory because that's what I have running in my lab. Through ICE normal operations, I imported the Active Directory groups. That's okay. And then I go in the MFA section and enable Duo configuration. And really, it's just there's an account information. And then these are the API keys I showed you earlier from the slides of cut and paste those API keys. And from the Duo side, you create the two separate applications. Again, cut and paste these API keys. It's no-brainer. Cut and paste into them, copy them into ICE, and off you go. Okay, let's see here. We'll keep going through. This is the authentication API side of it. Once you get it working, we'll keep going here. And you can test it, and it validates very quickly. It's just an API secure connection here. And then once that works, I think, do I have a, yeah, and these are your device admin policy. Yeah, this is just a recording from my lab there. And then you create your authorization policies and making sure that MFA has been enabled, and the MSA, yeah, this is your AD, and then here's the MFA policy, Duo is enabled, and off you go. Actually, do I have a demo here? And these are my commands. Yeah, anyway, I'll keep moving here, but you get the message, right? Just go through configuration and it works here. Okay, and then there's some iOS hardening or iOS XE hardening links here I incorporate for you to follow if you want to get it tested out. And then, you know, not just Cisco, we have published best recommendations how to harden your device, things turning off like IP HTTP server and don't use SNMP version 1, 2, the standard stuff that's been talked about for years and years, but not all customers still follow it. So don't take our word for it. You can follow America's Cyber Defense Agency. They have a document, basically CISA. It's the government agency saying these are best practices that you should follow. If you don't want to listen to Cisco, that's okay. Listen to our best practices for the industry. And to summarize it for you, since you don't have to read it, you've been here all week, there's too many slides to follow and track. I'll summarize it for you is, okay, well, disable smart services like no VStack. I think in my Zero Trust session, like in the Catalyst switches, Catalyst 9000, 9300s, there's a container capability. Anybody using those capabilities in the switches? No? Nobody? Yeah, so so you guys are using it or you're not using it? Okay, so I think it's called guest shell. Guest shell is one of the features in the switch. Well, because of Salt Typhoon, we have customers that said, no, that's too easy, too much freedom in case somebody wants to go crazy, like a hacker is in and wants to set up, instantiate their own server without you knowing. They want us to remove, customers want us to remove it. Like, oh, really? We're going, yeah, you want to host services in that container. Oh, like Thousand Eyes agent. So the question is like, well, we want that container, so you want to host applications like Thousand Eyes for telemetry observability. Yes, right? So this is a philosophical discussion at this point. Like customers say, turn that off because I don't want bad guys to install something. But at the same time, there's things that can be done. Like when you want to install code on there, the code that you install has to be digitally signed by Cisco. Right? We have to verify that is legit and before you can install it. So these are best practices to follow. But again, these are guest shells you can disable or VStack. It's up to you, right? But according to our guidance, like, hey, if you're not using it, turn it off. Okay? There's like no IP HTTP server, telnet, password 8 tap. Anybody using anything other than password hashing 5 or 6? Which have been deprecated, by the way. Anybody still using the earlier ones?
NTP will only store it as well.
Oh, type 7? Yeah. Oh, NTP, okay. Yeah, so. Yeah, thank you. Okay, I'm putting my head down here. Like, okay. All right, I'm saying type 8, type 9, but we still have type 7 support because of old things we can't keep up. So, avoid use of type 5 and type 7. I'm just eating my own words because this gentleman says, hey, you're forcing me to do this. Like, yes, I'm sorry. But use type 8 and type 9 when possible. Okay, that's our recommendation. And yeah, we are evolving, right? We're going to get to type 8, type 9 across everything. It's just, again, evolution and advancements of technology here. Okay? And then this is really how you do it, right? If you create your user store on here, it's username, algorithm type 8, and type 8 has this PD or PBKDF, right? Password-based key derivation function 2. Wow, that's a long term for higher level encryption. And also type 9, algorithm script. Like, oh, okay, I think I understand one a little better. It's a script. And so what's the difference between the two? I haven't been able to find the difference. I haven't been able to say, is 9 better than 8 in terms of system resources, right? Typically, when you turn on higher level description, it may consume more resources, or are there any limitations? Really doesn't matter. 8 or 9 is fine. What we're doing in terms of software, as I noticed from the development team, is like, I think with the iOS XE 16.10, everything going forward is going to 9 by default, right? All the newer software is going to type 9, and you simply can't backtrack. The only issue I see here is if you ever have to back rev it to whatever an earlier version, and you're a configure type 9, there's the danger, as I've seen, is like there's always the danger of, hey, I did this type 9 in my configuration, and when I just imported my configuration, I back rev it to an earlier version, what happens to that hash? You locked yourself out. That's a shooting myself in the foot here that we set for you. And I'm telling you now, shooting yourself in the foot. So talking to our TAC engineers like, hey, before you do that, if you have the back rev, they will tell you as well that, okay, let's change this back to like 6, an earlier version that's supported before you do the back rev, right? Just typical best practices before you shoot yourself in the foot here. Unless you have TACACS, it's talking to TACACS, it's pointing to a AAA server. That's the other recommendation as well. Like if you're not doing this locally, you point to TACACS with TLS 1.3. So those are things, these are steps we can build, right? Yes, sir? NSA's question, the comment is that NSA is not allowing you to use type 9. Okay. Okay, it's type 8. I wasn't aware of that, but thank you for the note. Type 8, okay. So I still stand by my comment about you can use type 8 or type 9, right? Because there's really no distinction in terms of performance. That's really all I care about. Both have very high level encryption. As long as it's not impacting performance, I'm good, okay? So thank you for that. I'll look into that here. And then, of course, if that's not enough, if you really want to lock down your infrastructure, which is, okay, now let's do X509 certificates for your SSH session into your switching. Okay, and this will definitely fall in line with our DoD customers, federal DoD customers, federal government agencies that, hey, I really need to lock things down. So this is one option, but most of them I've seen use like CAT card certificates on USB tokens and things to really allow control here, right? So it's an option for you if you really want to get really secure here. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, so far so good about TACACS, best practice encrypting, right? Best practices tips. I know it's not earth-shattering, right? It's not the next bright invention, but little baby steps for us to secure here. Next one, let's talk about authentication. Like, who is not familiar with SAML? We all are using SAML today. When you log into the Cisco authentication application, we're all using SAML authentication. That's given. So that's it. You're now SAML experts, right? But SAML really in the back end is based on HTTP. It's lots of applications or authentication are used because they're now existing in the cloud. So SAML is the language to use here. SAML is kind of the same way as TACACS, right? You're from your browser, you connect to a service provider or an application like Cisco Live or the Cisco application, and then you point to an IDP of your choice, and it could be Cisco Duo, which is an IDP as well now. And then authentication requests go through. The service provider says, hey, this device wants to authenticate, and then we issue password authentication, or if you turn on biometrics, FIDO2, WebAuthn, et cetera, all those multi-factor authentication gets pushed, and then there's an assertion that gets pushed down back to the user, not to the service provider, an assertion that contains username, group membership, whatever attributes that you have that allows you the right access level. Okay, that gets pushed back to you from the SAML assertion, and then once your browser or your application sees it, then you send that back at the very end, right back to the service provider or the enforcement devices. I got the token, these are my credentials, now let me in, right? So that's just the basic flow of it. And I'm explaining this because it's useful when it comes to troubleshooting. Lots of times, people successfully authenticate, and then when the service provider says, or the IDP says, okay, you're good, here's your assertion token back to you, and then the configuration is incorrect, and then the device browser goes, I can't authenticate, or the page unknown or something, right? You'll go through this process to try and troubleshoot where is it broken, okay? And then from a FIDO authentication, we're all familiar with where you can do biometrics, you can do pass keys, et cetera. It's all just part of the whole FIDO2 thing from a usability perspective, so I'll skip that here. Now, so what does that mean? We talked about TACACS for network infrastructure. Now we're doing these new authentication. They sort of coexist. It's not one versus the other, because I have customers says, I want everything to be in this SAML world because it's the new world we live in. I want the biometric authentication. I want to do pass keys, one-time passwords, et cetera, or code to minimize phishing and identity theft. Okay, well, we can't get there. We're just not there yet. Because on this side, there's an RFC 8907 for TACACS. It's been there for 20 years. We have to change the RFC to incorporate that into it. Okay, and we are looking at that now at Cisco, like, hey, we wrote the TACACS protocol for the industry. We're investigating how do we make those authentication better. So that means TACACS, when you configure that secret for your network access device, hopefully at some point, you don't have to type in a secret, long, complex secret anymore. There's key exchanges going on after you establish authentication up front. So all that is in the works in development, just not here, but is moving that way. So until then, both have to exist. We just have to manage which one's more reasonable here. So in a SAML world, okay, how do I do granular user access control? So we're familiar with the Active Directory and LDAP, right? We authenticate to ICE as an example, or your domain access, domain controller. We look for group memberships, and then you match group memberships or a member of whatever attributes, and then you use that to enforce or deliver an access control policy. That's been here for a long time, and this is just an example of, hey, in ICE, that's what we do. We check for, you're authenticating against ICE, we check for group memberships, and we give you an ACL, an authorization policy, okay? Now, on the SAML side, it's kind of the same way, it's just much more complicated now. From a logic perspective. Well, the logic's still the same, but from a configuration, is you have to protect the application, like on the network side is network, but now it's the application. You get specific in the application. You have to configure all these single sign-on SAML metadata stuff, and then the claims. And I'll show you what that means. It's just a little bit more work. So I'm using Microsoft Entra because Microsoft Entra dominates the world. Everybody has it. I use it as well in my lab configuration, so it's perfect. Perfect for my example here. Microsoft Entra, as you log in, I go to the user groups. Here's Jerry, and here's all of my attributes, my phone number, my organization IDs, whatever. It's all, everything about me is there in Entra, right? It's a full-blown, very usable, scalable IDP. But what's unique here, now we're dealing with user principal names, display names, surnames, mail, right? These are very similar to like VSAs in RADIUS, attributes as you send back and forth in the RADIUS protocol. So now you're dealing with this, with these protocol. So in an example, I go in Entra, I go into the enterprise application I want to protect, and here's I'm trying to protect my FTD, my firewall traffic. Here's a policy, and I go into these 1, 2, 3, 4 steps that Microsoft has invented, which is nice. So 1, 2, 3, and I set up the single sign-on. How is a user going to sign in here? And then when I go into there, there's all this metadata stuff, entity IDs. These are, again, metadata configurations. And here's a whole list of attributes that I have to use. I can use to define who I am to match what I can do. And one thing that's not there is user groups. Right? By default, it's simply not there. So leveraging what I normally use, and hopefully what you guys normally use, is like Active Directory group memberships or Entra group memberships, right? So you'll have to add this in there, but it's not hard. You just you create one called groups. In my example here, edit, and then you go into add a group, and then you go through all these things, and I have to find this out the hard way. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna blindly, logically walk myself through this, like 2 years ago when we were learning all this stuff. It's like, Okay, I'll walk it through. It wasn't that simple. I had to actually ask my Microsoft guy. But you go through this, add in groups. It's just new things for you to learn, and you simply configure groups, whatever variable or attribute that you want to use to match for your group memberships. Okay, and then once you create that, then okay, there's object IDs that gets created with like employee or contractors or management or sales from a configuration that you can set up. Okay. What's unique here with Microsoft is that even though I'm configuring my group attributes to be member like employees or contractors or guests, the name is there that I recognize, but there's object IDs that gets associated with it. And that object ID says, when I use that group membership, I can't use the name. I have to use the object IDs. So here's an example of Cisco FMC firewall management. When I'm trying to do SAML authentication, I'm trying to match based on group memberships, I have to cut and paste these long code for membership, which is kind of odd, so I don't know why Microsoft hasn't changed it, but still at the end of it, it works. You just have to keep track of what you're cutting and pasting. So, it is what I have used, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm stuck with it until Microsoft changes all this. Then once you configure that, we use this, use the object ID instead of the actual object name, but that's fine, it works. And then, let's see here. And then you can start assigning it to a right authorization profile. So if you're not using Microsoft for the Duo users here, Duo has its own IDP today, and you can create attributes like we can do with Microsoft. Okay, it's the only thing that we won't force you to use those long code. When you create a variable called employees or sales, you actually use employees or sales. Right? It's just an object name. Okay, so here's an example of FMC for single sign-on. Like this is the single sign-on page for firewall management. There's a link at the bottom, single sign-on. No more typing in your username and password. Simply do single sign-on. Click there. Okay, it's that, and hopefully you're all moving in that direction from FMC perspective. Okay, and again, you can use Microsoft or you can use Okta, OneLogin, Ping, et cetera. It's all there. If you're using something that's not listed there, that's fine. The others exist, right? It's basically just metadata stuff for SAML that you kind of configure, cutting and paste. So on the firewall side, for you to set this up, go to that page I was showing you, and again, now I'm just copying, I'm using Duo as my example. I'm just copying metadata fields from the Duo site into the firewall side here. So a cut and paste and certificates and things like that, download, and these are entity IDs. Are you guys, I mean, has anybody done this or not seen this? So you've done it before, a few, but not everybody has seen it, right? So, okay. Anyways, it's not that hard, right? So I put this in here purposely so you can follow. If you go back home, you go, okay, I want to set this up just to test it out, follow my example, it works, okay? And then once you mapped the memberships, and then there's roles of what is your actual authorization policy, what can you do? So from a firewall perspective, there's a field down here. There's a default one, like, hey, what happened if you don't match anything? There's a default catch-all, and default catch-all by default is like read-only, which is the right thing to do here, okay? And then, so really, when it's all working, like I created a group for admin, I created a group for help desk, then if these things don't match, then it goes to the default rule. So it's that straightforward here. If it's working, you get the audit logs, okay? So that's pretty easy. And then same thing on the Duo side. If you point it to Duo for IDP authentication, logs are all there. Shows you who's logged in, the time of day, et cetera. What you won't see in Duo, because Duo is just the IDP user authentication piece, right? Logs of who's logged in, but you won't see what did Jerry do from a command authorization. Did he issue a config T, or did he turn on an IPS policy or something like that? That is not there in Duo because Duo is just doing the user authentication piece. The logs for system audit is there in the FMC. Okay. Okay, so a demo here. I'll go through a demo. We got about half an hour left. I think we're okay on time. Is like here's on the Duo side. Here's Jerry. That's my command. That's my account there, and you can see my account there, and then what group I belong to, and that I belong into that admin group, right, from a group membership perspective. Then I go back and see. Okay, now there's what did I say? Spike. Okay, Tom, Jerry, Spike. If you know my reference, Tom and Jerry. So here's for Spike. He's configured for different group membership here. And this is all the single sign-on stuff I showed you earlier. And from a single sign-on perspective, like I configure these applications, and I simply cut and paste the metadata from the Duo side into the FMC. Okay, and I'll just keep moving forward if you guys are okay with this. And I'll post this demo so you can follow it on your own time when you get back. Okay? And then same thing on the ICE side. ICE side, very similar. Instead of logging in as an admin, you log in as SAML, using SAML administrator login here. And here's an example, I think, of in ICE, I go into the SAML authentication, and then, but I'll have to log in as the local user first to create it. But here I'm logging in as Jerry on the ICE side. Okay, I'm going through multi-factor authentication and going through the main ICE page. And now I'm logged in as Jerry. I'm a full admin. I have the full menu set capabilities defined for me, allowed by my role. Okay, and then these are just the detail logs up. Oh, hey, look, I logged in, what command I issued is all logged there. And then on the Duo side is ICE configuration. That's the ICE application I'm protecting. Okay, so I click on there. Just create a name, and then I sort of go down and fill out all the SAML fields here. Okay, so if you're okay, I'll move on so you can follow the videos on your own time, right? I don't want to bore you here. Okay, last thing we're going to talk about is Live Protect. Right, so far I'm saying, look, let's look at TACACS, look at RADIUS, let's kind of turn on additional encryption, multi-level stuff to make sure you lock down the infrastructure so that you're eventually pushing out any breaches on your network, right? Last piece is Live Protect. Who has, oh, again, have you heard of Live Protect, right? From your local account team? It's a hot topic going around in all my meetings so far with customers. So Live Protect, for everybody, just like the base of it is network security not enough? Yeah, because it's about infrastructure having vulnerabilities. The bad guys are getting in, so what are we doing to help you protect your infrastructure? So we bought a company called Isovalent 2 years ago probably, or 3 years ago, and there's technologies using eBPF that we acquired. And so we're using eBPF as part of the layer defense. And then, so eBPF is, using Tetracon is their protected application. And then we're using that to protect traffic coming into the network switches as an example, okay? And so eBPF is a Linux kernel protection, and it basically, what it says is it watches command calls at the kernel level, okay? At the kernel. And I got a video, a demo shows you how Live Protect actually works, okay? So it's intercepting traffic, it's matching at the system level of good things and bad things, and then is taking action, okay? And so to really get it up and working, and it's starting with Nexus OS. Right, the Nexus, these are the switches, these are the numbers, 6.1, 6.2, these are update. We know, for us, we have to submit slides, usually like a month or two ahead of time, Cisco Live. So at the time of the submission, these are fairly current, so there may be newer versions now, but that's okay. It's still the foundation for you to work up from. You just need to have fairly recent switches with 24 gigs of RAM. Okay, so I think most of the switches now have enough of that. I think it's to not support some of these older switches don't have them. If you have less than 24 gigs of RAM, it simply won't support it. So how does it work in Nexus OS? It's just a command you turned on. Feature NX Secure at the CLI, and then at that point it spins up a container. That's the eBPF portion of the container from a Live Protect. Okay, we're spinning that up, and it takes like a minute or two for it to spin up, and then you simply create the commands of monitor, trace, or enforce, right? Because maybe you don't trust our implementation up front, you simply want to monitor, see what's happening. So you can go into monitor mode and not do anything, but ultimately you can turn on enforce to block vulnerabilities, day zeros when they come here. Okay, and these are just some of the commands that you can configure here. So what does the policy look like? It's a container, it's an agent running on the device, and there's a policy, like an IPS policy, but this is in YAML format here, and you can see the metadata of, hey, there's a file, there's an ID for an application, what are the modules that we're checking, where are some selectors, the directories, the key variable matching that we're using to detect an illegitimate operation here. Okay, and then at the end of the day is what is the action to take when it matches. And then so really, you turn this on, and there's a couple of actions. You can monitor this at the isolated Tetra CLI. So if you log into the agent at its local CLI, you can see it. Or you can look at the switch file, because it's actually generating live files into the switch syslog itself. Or you can look at the CLI of the NX OS. It's all options, up to you. Okay? And when we actually recorded this a couple months ago, the streaming data to the Nexus dashboard wasn't quite ready. It was in beta or development at the time, and I think it's now available. Okay, so it'll stream to a UI if you're not sitting at the console, and I don't suspect you guys will be sitting at the console all the time, right? You're relying on a dashboard, Nexus dashboard, to report what's happening here. So at the end of the day, that's what you'll likely be using. And then so there's local logs that you can look at, and a bunch of commands here. I'll show you the demo here. So this is just more about the software versions and et cetera, et cetera. And from a performance perspective, it's actually nothing. 1%, 2% to implement Live Protect, so you're not impacting your switch performance at the end of the day. It's a layer defense that helps. It can only help here. So let me show you the demo here. So this is our UI. We logged into the switch. And here you can see my switch software image 10.6.2. I got more than 24 gigs of RAM. And then I'm going to run a command called show run. I include the feature that's been enabled, and there's no the NS secure. This is the Live Protect feature here. Okay, so now I want to turn this on, called feature NX secure. I want to enable it here. Turn that on, hit enter, and it started. So it's a container. It takes about a minute or two maximum that I measure. It's like it's showing, look, my Docker container is initializing. So it's running in the background here, and you can check it after a minute or two. And then you can do some show commands to see, hey, what is the status? Is it really booting up? And so it's just typical CLI commands, right? You can see, yeah, it started. That's the NX secure agent has been started here, okay? And then once, after a minute or two, it's been started, okay. Now you want to add this policy, Live Protect policy here. And this policy is what you add on like an IPS signature. Turn this on, and now it's been added, okay? And you can, by default, well, you can configure like what is the mode that you want it to be in. And it's in showing NX policy right here, status, and I am currently in monitor mode. I am not blocking because I don't trust this. So this is a simulated attack that we're using because it's been a little hard to do a real attack. It's like 2 months ago when we were testing all this. So it's a simulated attack here. So you can see here in monitor mode, there are 0 hits. So that means my signature has been enabled. So now as a dev ops user, I'm logging into the switch, right? So I'm the admin in the background. I'm logging into the switch, and I'm logged into my switch, but I don't have the full privileges to get into all these commands, like show run, I can't run that, but I can get into conf mode. And as a dev user, I have limited capabilities. So I'm going to go into Python, I misspelled Python. We'll go back and correct that in a second here. We're going to run a Python script to push some files down. Okay, and in this case, we're just doing a simple hello file in this volatile directory. I have permission to create a file, so I'm going to do an open and just push that file. And you can see that, okay, a file has been created into that directory. Do an ls, and there's my hello file. Okay, so that's good. So think of this as the base core infrastructure of your switch here, and I don't have read-write permissions. So you can see here, if there's a vulnerability in this specific directory or in this specific daemon or file set, then you want to know. So in this case, now the dev user or somebody says, hey, I want to change that file permission to 777. I want the full read-write, right? I want to do the privilege escalation here. So I'm changing it from, and I was able to change it from read only to read-write, to do privilege escalation. Right, my simulated attack that somebody has come in to modify the permissions, so now I can do more things. And so they've done it. Okay, so now I'm going to show my policy status, monitor mode, no blocking. My detection has detected it. There's 2 hits. That signature or that protection level has detected here. Okay, so look, okay, well, I detected an attack. Now I'm going to do this chmod 77 a few more times just to trigger, yeah, it is triggering. Something bad is happening. Okay, so what do I want to do next? Well, this is in our lab, like, okay, I want to change it to enforce. So now I go ahead and kick this protection signature 0008 into protection mode or enforcement mode. And I'm going to go and change that to enforcement, policy update. Okay, so I change that to policy update, show my status. It'll show now 0 because I reset the enforcement mode. I went to enforcement, okay? And now let's go ahead and go back and try to do privilege escalation for that specific file again. Bam, the line, permission denied because I am now enforcing action on this. Okay, so you try to do this a few more times, it doesn't work, and now you can see here your logs have been, it's sent to the logs, and then even the, I think I showed you an alert status, the hit count in enforcement mode will show up. And you can catalog the log file to see all the actions, everything that's been triggered in this format. It's all there. Okay, so this is I'll call this a short-term solution from a CLI monitoring. In reality, it's like from an operation perspective, you'll want to stream this to like your Nexus dashboard and ultimately Cisco Cloud Connect to monitor all of this. Yeah?
Is there any requirements to send logs to Splunk?
Is there an option?
There's an option, right?
Yeah, sending logs, I mean, you can send logs to anywhere, right?
But like, do you need to go to config mode, or you can do it from the...
Yeah, you can do it within here. You can send it locally, and you can also stream it to our Nexus dashboard, or you can stream it to Splunk, right? This is all option, and absolutely Splunk will be part of this. At the time we're doing this, Splunk wasn't quite there yet. Yeah.
Where did you get the policy from?
Policy comes from Cisco. That's what we do. So that means like the Mythos thing that everyone's talking about, like, hey, Mythos has found thousands of vulnerabilities in your Nexus infrastructure. Okay, these are 0-day vulnerabilities. Cisco says, oh, this is bad. We want to publish patches for it or protection for it. We will issue these protection signatures by LifeProtect to protect the infrastructure up front. That's what LifeProtect is doing. Yep, question.
Is there automated downloading of the rule set?
Automation download, yeah, it's going to come from the configuration from LifeProtect itself. That is what it's designed to do, right, from the Nexus dashboard, yes. That is something we will push.
That's like the file.
Yeah. Yeah. So my demo here was, again, 2 months ago when we're still working on the early version. It's a manual. Like my little protection here was only watching that system level call at that file. But from a real world protection, when we do detect a day 0 vulnerability, LifeProtect is what we're using to automatically push down to your devices to protect you. That is what LifeProtect is doing.
So that's the compensating control.
That's the compensating control. And that means we're only buying you time. Okay? We're not patching it for you. We still recommend that you patch when you have time, but we're buying you time with protection so you can plan your patching. Okay, question?
Yeah,
Wait, 1 second, okay, go ahead.
yeah, to follow up on that, so this would be your intermediate protection updates throughout your patch cycle.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
when you get to your patch cycle, you'd upgrade, which would presumably
Yep.
correct many of these. Does it do the auto cleanup to get rid of the previous protections that were there?
So,
Based on the new rev, how does
yeah. So we watch for the zero-day vulnerability. And once you patch, right, you don't need that protection level. We will remove that for you. Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure it wasn't really clear whether it was actually
Yeah.
doing the cleanup on it. And
Yep.
then whatever vulnerabilities to the new
Yeah.
code would be pushed through last.
Yep. So it's, I think it's a cool thing, right? It's a layer of defense up front. Question, yeah? Or comment?
The other question is if, sorry, I lost it.
Okay. Oh, that's all right. We got a few minutes so you can come back. All right, so I'm going to keep going here. So let me summarize, and we can talk more if you like after this. We're a few minutes early, so I strive to finish on time or early, not to go over.
Are these going to be are these going to be released before the OS patches are available?
Yes, that's what design. I'll tell you a little secret. These are designed to be released before, as you would expect, right? Because if there's zero-day vulnerability, if we have a patch, why would you need this if you can patch? Or we're buying you time. This is designed to be proactive. There's no patch yet, okay? So you need this. Now, I want to do a sales marketing pitch, right? In our other products, like in our Cisco firewalls with IPS, we have new rule sets called truffle. We call it truffle hunters. Okay, what is truffle hunters? These are IPS signatures for vulnerable applications that Talos has identified out in the wild. There are no patches for. Maybe you're Dolby or maybe Cisco, whatever application. There are no patches for it yet, but we know about it because the whole threat intel community knows it's out there. So truffle hunter rules will have those signatures enabled already to buy you time. So that's sort of an early live protect, but it only exists in the firewall. If you don't have a firewall in your defense layer, it can't help you, right? So, yeah, question.
Does these signatures only protect traffic to like the control plane directly to the switch, or can it also secure the data plane and the traffic going through the switch?
It is designed to protect the control plane, like what Salt Typhoon and Salt Typhoon is like. I want to compromise your infrastructure, not looking at user traffic, right? So it's what Live Protect is doing here. All right, let me summarize so you guys can get on out of here to the next session is, so we talked about the different typhoons, right? Those are the real threats out there, and who knows what the next one's going to be, and that's why we want to be proactive, right? Turn on the latest level encryption when you can, like TLS 1.3. Turn on multi-factor authentication. Leverage the capabilities of SAML, right? If everything starts to move over to SAML authentication, single sign-on, but understand, right? The SAML authentication for management control, it's not granular like what TACACS can provide, right? TACACS can say, you cannot do a show interface gig 105, right? The SAML infrastructure doesn't do that. So ICE is slightly different, firewall is different, and any other application is different. It's up to the management console. So it is what it is, but that's why both need to be balanced and you understand what it is here. And then Live Protect, I think it's a really cool thing. It's coming. Nexus OS and other platforms will follow. It is a huge effort now at Cisco to make sure Live Protect is available for all the platforms, right, in time, okay? So with that said, hey, I want to thank you guys for coming to this session. Hopefully it was useful or some valuable in terms of little bits of best practice and information. And again, like these sessions, I appreciate a good score, 5 stars if you want to. If you don't want to, don't fill it out. No, I'm just kidding. Fill it out, right? Give us comments, but it is what we use, or the Cisco Live management team, like they look at our scores. If we're good, we'll come back next year. If not, You know, I sit at home, so I don't have to come. I don't have to come to Vegas in this 100-degree weather. So, you decide. Do I want to send Jerry back to hot weather or not? So these are options. But still, I appreciate. Give us feedback on what's good. What else you want to see? There's something more you want to see. I'm all open for it. Okay. Hey, thank you. Have a great rest of the day.